Hi, my name is Judy and I'm the City Stitcher, and welcome to my Flosstube channel. Today is Sunday, October the 2nd, and as you can probably tell from the interesting lighting that is going on, it is a beautiful sunshiny day where I am. The sunroom is glorious and warm and lovely, and you know how much I love heat and warmth and all of those good things. For all you crazy people who are looking for fall, it is fall here. Fall has arrived. The leaves are turning, they're falling, which means there's yard work to be done. I'm fine, it'll be okay. But in the meantime, I think I've mentioned this before, I really love my sunroom because it does extend my, certainly the sunroom is warmer than the rest of my house regularly, just because it gets a little more concentrated focus here, but it's extends my season out here. I will say clearly it's fall, the evenings are cooling off, my crib blankets are having to come out, and I'm having these moments sitting here in the evenings going, if I'm going to stitch in the evening, we're getting to that time where I might need to move back into the house. The sunroom is really attached to the house. I have no idea why I always reference it as if it's like separate from the house. It is not separate from the house. There's a doorway between here and the rest of the house. But there's the sunroom and then there's the rest of the house. Anyway. If you are a new viewer, this is a channel about cross-stitching and the stitching that I've done over the past week, so I hope you enjoy what you see. And for those of you who are returning viewers, as always, I truly do appreciate all of you who come back week after week and watch. First, I'm going to apologize. I'm sorry that the last two episodes have been so long. 2 hours each. Sorry about that. One of them I knew was going to be long. The other one I wasn't expecting to be quite so long. But anyway, I promise this one's going to be a shorter video. I promise. Don't forget, you don't have to watch it all at one time. Stitchin' Mommy has posted a video this week, which is a whip parade, which is going to be great. I can't wait to watch it. It's 3 hours. I have some stitching goals this week, so she's going to get watched in the oddest of chunks. I've got some home stuff that I've got to work on, and that's really when I'm planning on working on her stuff. So it'll be, hers will get worked up in chunks as well. Same thing, it's a 3-hour video. I probably won't sit down and watch it in a 3-hour chunk, so it'll get worked on a bit. So don't forget, for any of my longer ones, you don't have to watch it all in one go. Let's get to some of the comments from last week. Denise made a comment about she was looking at her planner, really excited about it, was sort of wondering what she was going to do with it. Now she's all excited about color coding because she's multi-craftual. Wait till you see what I show you. You'll be very excited. Just wait. It's coming. Carol, sorry about the soapbox episode on ranting about back shaming. That went on longer than I was expecting, but apparently when I get on a soapbox, I make full use of it. Carol made a comment about reverse back shaming is also a thing. So for those people going like, you should look at my backside. My backsides are fantastic. It actually turned her off. And again, it's the same thing, right? I always get... It's an interesting thing when people sort of going like, what do we do about backs? How do we feel about backs? And yeah, when we get to the topic, I'll talk about my views, a little more about my views on that and traveling and all sorts of things, but it's the front that's important. It's the front that's important, and it's important that you are enjoying your stitching. It's important that you're enjoying your stitching. Now, it's pot, kettle, that whole thing, because you know how many times I sort of go, I didn't enjoy this part, but I really love the outcome. So I don't say that I always enjoy all of my stitching, because there's a number of pieces where you go like, it was, this part I didn't enjoy, but I love the outcome. So for the most part, hopefully you're enjoying your stitching. It's the front that matters the most. Let's just not forget that. Shar made a comment because I'd asked her to let us know what she'd got, and she said, you mean I have to confess? And the answer is, it's not confession. in the stitching world, this is not called confessing. This is called sharing. Because you just never know. I'm always interested in what people are getting, right? Like if you got a color, now if it's a brown color, I probably won't care so much. But if you went on there and you found something else where I'm like, I'm sorry, what? If it was a name I didn't recognize, you know, it would have sent me immediately screaming to the Dying for Cross Stitch, you know, webpage to go, what does that look like? Because you just never know. Okay, my next question is, was it linen or Lugana? And if it was linen, did it look any different than the Lugana ones I showed? She got Cabernet, she got some of the Cabernet colors, the shades, and some of the butterscotch, for those of you who are inquiring. So they're shades that we've seen. Well, not all of them, but, you know, I showed you a butterscotch. I showed you 3 of the Cabernets were in there, so she loved them. They're really great colors. They're really great colors. Anyway, I'm glad you enjoyed them. Rachel Q made a comment about her mom and her university experience in the 60s. And, you know, I have to say kudos to them. It wasn't necessarily, even in the 60s, it wasn't easy being a woman in university. You know, more likely, like if you weren't going for education or, you know, things where they were like women's work. Yeah, it was an interesting time for women, as they were beginning to say, we can do other things. Anyway, thank you for sharing that story. I found that interesting as well. Melody asked a question about my planning, and if my planning and my 5-year planning is predominantly about starts, and it's mostly about starts, but it's also about, I try to figure into the plan sort of that all of any of my carry forward whips, particularly from the prior year, well, this 2022 and 2021 are being worked in the plan, that they at least get worked on. So you saw that, so that's why my August theme for this year was August Heats, is because it didn't work out quite the way I thought it, but I'm still glad that I did it, because I said, this is your month where I only had, well, I was only supposed to have 1 new start. It turned into 2 new starts, which is totally fine. But I spent the rest of the month working on whips that had not seen the light of day since last year. So I'm glad that I did it. Generally, what I'm working into the plan is I am planning on working on whips. I've got designated carry forward whips that I'm supposed to be working on every month. Are they always targeted for a finish? No, because some of them are bigger than others. I don't know what year Jerusalem's going to get finished. That's not really the point. Anywho, Jerusalem was supposed to be worked in August. It didn't get worked on. It might get worked on a little bit later, but it got a healthy working on earlier this year. So it is built into the plan where I'm working on whips. I do try to focus on making sure that at least one of the carry forward whips gets worked on in the year. So the one that I was, my goal of my carry forward whips from 2021 into 2022 and getting finished, my goal was to get the Banquet by Frida's Fancy Stitching, that canvas work piece, complete. And I was successful at that. So that one's complete and it looks lovely. I'm very excited. It's very nice. Love that, love that, love that. Anyway, so it's not targeting all of them finishes, which means my carry forward whip count is getting a little bit bigger. We'll talk about that as we sort of get more into sort of my year-end stuff. I am getting to a point where I'm trying to go like, you need to knock some of the stuff off. And so how are we going to do that? Jerusalem's going to take a long time. Polar Mandala is going to take a long time, but we'll talk about that anyway. So it is worked into the plan. Sometimes I'm successful, you know, if I go back to June, my plans for June were completely thrown off because I ended up going to StitchCon. Right, so I had some very specific goals. I knew what I was going to do and how I was going to work on it and how that whole thing was going to play out. And none other than the cottage of the month, which took me a whole month to get finished, none of it actually got worked on because I went to StitchCon, and then I had StitchCon starts and a StitchCon finish, and then I came back with that piece that I stitched for my dad unexpectedly, which needed to be done by Father's Day, and 27 other things. So, you know, best laid plans, threw them out the window, did something completely different, which I'm totally fine with. I'm still happy with what I got accomplished because I actually finished other things. But my goal for June didn't quite, my original goal for June did not get completed for the most part. So, but that's life. Things happen. Tina Stitches left a comment. She started Royal Tudor and has made the comment that the charting for the black work around the windows in the corner, which I know, of course, what she's talking about because I've got Royal Tudor cert. My hands are just incredibly dry. So she made the comment that watch that because there's an issue with the chart around that. I have made a note of that and stuck it in the kit. So thank you for making that comment. And she's like, maybe I should bring that out. I'm like, yes, bring it out. Bring it out. That one looks lovely. I've watched, there's somebody else that's stitching that. I was watching some of it and I was like going, am I just behind? Like, have I not seen more progress? And she hasn't made a video in quite some time. But I was like going, oh, it looks stunning. Anyway, isn't that what I say about all the chatelaines? It's probably what I say about all of them, but it's because they really are amazing in real life. The pictures never do them justice. Sarah left a comment where she says, I'm a regular viewer, but rarely comment, which I hear you on that one. That's me too. I'm not the best commenter myself because usually my problem is while I'm watching the video, I talk to them while I'm watching them. And usually by the time I get to the end of the video, I have no idea what I've said to them to put into the comment anyway. I hear you on that one. But she says she's a regular enough viewer that her spouse recognizes my voice. So that I put you in that's a regular viewer. And I love this comment because their spouse says, oh, you're visiting with Judy. And I think that's the best line. And thank you for sharing it. Because yes, I do consider any time that you're watching my videos, we're having a visit. Yes, I loved it. I loved it. So just here's a little moment for you, Sarah. Get your spouse ready. Hi, Sarah's spouse. We're visiting too. Anyway, she had a question about, you know, fancy ladies, and she's got a goal of coming up with a fancy ladies wall. And she's like, any views on or suggestions for fancy men, particularly Jesus or Santas? I was going to pull out this one chart and I forgot. So I'll specifically put the name of it in the notes section below for you if you want to go have a look at it. So for Jesus, I don't have any recommendations because I have an atypical view about pictures of Jesus. It's it's me. There are lots of versions of Jesus out there and lots of people who go, this really speaks to me, which I think is great. I get hung up on the fact that nobody knows what he actually looked like. So I have a whole hang up going, like, there's lots of depictions, but I don't know how accurate they are. You saw how wigged out I got about, you know, the face isn't exactly like Queen Elizabeth and I can't do it. So that's really why I can't do Jesus pictures either, because I have no idea if it bears any resemblance at all. So I have a thing. So I have no Jesus pictures in my collection. In terms of Santas, the one that I've got in my stash that hopefully at some point over the next 20 years, yeah, you heard that right, over the next 20 years, hopefully is going to make its way to the top of the pile. I think it is called The Song of Christmas. I think it's a lavender and lace. It's the one, it's Santa, not really, it's Father Christmas holding the Christ child with two angels sort of standing beside him. I'm pretty sure there's a tree in there as well. tree, I think tree, maybe, I'm pretty sure there's a tree, but don't quote me on that one. For the most part, it's Father Christmas holding the Christ child with these two small angels. They're not really cherubs. So that's the one, that's the Santa that's in my to start pile. That is sort of my, if somebody said you have to work on a Santa picture right away, that's probably the one that I would work on. I don't know if that works for you, but I think it's called The Song of Christmas. I will look it up. I will specifically reference it in the notes section below when this gets published. So that's all I have. If anybody out there has recommendations for her, please throw them down into the comments, and because community support and help is always appreciated. All right. With that, just another quick reminder for anybody who's in the Greater Calgary area that the Ujama Grandmas Babies and Beyond sale, Bags, Babies and Beyond sale is coming up. Not this weekend coming up, but it's the Friday and Saturday after Canadian Thanksgiving. So next week will be the Sunday before Canadian Thanksgiving. It'll be our Thanksgiving weekend. My family has Thanksgiving dinner on the Monday. It's interesting because some of our we've got a couple of American cousins that are coming up because they want to do Canadian Thanksgiving, so they're coming up for a visit, and they will be joining our Thanksgiving table next weekend. All right, with that, let's get into some stitching because I promise this is going to be a shorter video. As always, I am working on my Drawn Thread sampler of stitches. This is a series of 9 charts by the Drawn Thread. We're coming down to it. I have successfully completed 7 of the 9 charts. I am now working on VWX. Here's a look at a little closer look at what those 3 letters are supposed to look like. I did quite well. So here's where I got to. If I were smart, I would really, let's see, what did I do? I did the vault stitch, which is this. And I've done the navy blue, the dark blue for the letter V block. There is still some light blue to go in there. So tonight's project is to finish that and then do the next 2 specialty stitches beside it, which are Van Dyke chain stitch and the Van Dyke stitch. That Van Dyke chain stitch is going to be, I'm not going to enjoy it. I'm good with a chain stitch when it's like all horizontal or all vertical. When the chain stitch is like going in diagonals and on angles, I don't do well with it. So it's probably gonna annoy me and take quite a bit of time. I will tell you that I did work on this. So this is a big stitch. I worked on this more than on Sunday. By the end of Sunday, I had finished this and I had probably done about half of this dark blue. And then I was looking at the Van Dyke and I went, you just really need to finish the rest of the dark blue so that when we come down to this week, there's about 5. Yeah, there's about 40 stitches of light blue to go in here, and then I can get working on the other 2. Anyway, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. We'll get it done. I'm pretty sure it's going to be a frustrating stitch. You just never know, but there's a lot of those diagonal chain stitches, so we'll see how. Check back next week. We'll see how we do. I was looking at the chart. So my goal is that the rest of this will get finished this week. I'm quite sure it's going to take a full 2 Sundays of stitching to get W, because that's a big one. This one is, it's all just regular cross stitches, no specialty stitches whatsoever. Now, multicolored, but there's no big deal about that. So I was looking at my October calendar going, I think I can have all of VWX done by the end of October 29th, which means technically that gives me, if I stay on my standard 2 weeks a chunk, 6 weeks in 6 weeks from then. So, you know, the first half of December, I think I might have all of this complete. Oh my goodness, Sarah Stitch and Bobby, thank you so much for coming up with this idea and wanting to do a stitch along, because it's working out well for me. It's working out well for me. So yeah, it's coming along. I just have to fill in this little bit over here by the end of the year. And 9 charts that were not in my plan, my original plan, will have been stitched. Okay, then I was very clear last week that I was going to work on Polar Mandala. So the very next thing that I pulled out after, so Sunday I did the sampler stitching, Monday I pulled out sampler stitches and finished off that dark blue. So then of course the next thing that I pulled out was Ink Circles Bee's Knees. Why? Because I had 1 length of thread sitting over here for Bee's Knees, and I just went, just get it in. Just get it stitched in. So I did a little bit of work on Bee's Knees. Yes, I have props all over everywhere. So Bee's Knees got a little bit of work, which was really sort of this, getting this done. So there's just a little bit left to go. I was really hoping to get that worked into the plan. Okay, the real answer is I was really hoping I was going to get that stitched on Friday night, but that didn't happen. So this might unexpectedly come out in the first half of October, just so I can finish off this corner. So yeah, for hauling out an older WIP for the first time in 2022, since it got worked on in August of 2021, I will have accomplished exactly, hopefully by the end of this year, one corner of the inner part will be done. There's still a whole border to go around it. Again, let's not kid ourselves. There's a lot of work left to go on this. Anyway, but every stitch that goes in is 1 stitch more than there was when it got put away the first time. Okay, so then after that, so on Tuesday, I pulled out my Chatelaine Designs Polar Mandala so I could work on my center square. So I'm over here doing 1/1 on 32 count. Yeah, crazy, crazy. But you knew that about me. Okay. Yes, I have to look and make sure it's going in the right direction. So where did I get to? So I did, so last time I got my 1,000 stitches in, which sort of did a swoop up here, and I hit the top of, so this is the top of the square. So then I came over, I did my 1,000 stitches here, just, you know, doing more of it. So yes, believe it or not, so this sort of dark tealy aqua blue and everything over here. So that is my 1,000 stitches. So I will have put in a couple of 1,000 stitches into this center square. The 2,000 stitches isn't even 10% of it. Anyway, it's 2,000 stitches more then has been put into this project over the last, I would say, 4 years, probably 5. So, you know, hey, it's making progress. And now that it's come out, it's been worked into my 2023 plan that it should be getting some more stitches. Maybe not a ton, but it's going to be getting some stitches. On my big giant frame. And then my reward. So that did take me Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. My reward when I got my 1,000 stitches in was I was going to work on my musical Christmas. Because so this is an old chart. I looked it up, 1989. Yeah, 1989. So artistic needle, musical Christmas. I'm working on the table runner on 28 count Christmas Shenandoah fabric by Zweigart, which has since been discontinued. And so I did another instrument, and the next instrument that we are adding on is the harp. There you go, all sparkly. So on this side we have 3 of them done, the drum, the trombone, and the harp. So the funny thing is, when I was working on this harp with the number 8 braid, I had, actually when I was finishing it up, I had a fairly decent chunk of Kreinik left on my needle, and I went, like, you just need to put that in. Now, I finished all of this because the goal was to get this done. I finished this, I put the 300 stitches in, and I went, it's time for bed. So on Saturday, October the 1st, I decided I was gonna, well, clean up my area over here a little bit, and part of that cleanup was you need to get the Kreinik that's still sitting on your needle into the piece. So on the other side, wait for it, I got 20 stitches in. It's exactly 20. Anyway, but it will make when I go to do harp number 2 easier, because I will at least have started it. So there's my 20 stitches into harp number 2. So you can, at the moment, you can tell side number 1 versus side number 2. But we're making progress. We're making progress. Again, this was an unexpected, I'm just going to hold it up one more time. This was an unplanned start for this year, but I'm really glad I started it. And again, it's usually I can get one of these instruments knocked out in an evening. You know, the harp is 4 colors. I know it only looks like 3. It's because there's number 8 braid and the 002C to do the strings of the harp. But it's 4 colors. Easy peasy. And, you know, that's actually really good about the reward system thing that I'm going on, because it's like you can do the reward and go, you got something accomplished. It's, you know, anywhere between about 300 and 400 stitches. Like, those 300 stitches, those got stitched in a hurry. Anyway, so Musical Christmas is coming along, which is great. I always have this problem. They're piled really nicely over here. I have not properly set up my tails yet again for where they're supposed to go once I'm done with them. All right, so then we get to Saturday, which is October 1st. So all the new things kicked in. So as always, I started my new Cottage of the Month by Country Cottage Needleworks. This is October. Brace yourselves. I am using all of the called for colors for this piece. I know. Who knew that was possible? There was the possibility I was going to change the roof colors, and then I decided no. So this is this is where I got to on that one. So the roof is complete and started a little bit here on the side of the house. So a little bit of a start. I was looking at it going like, I kind of hoped I'd get like about another 100 stitches into it for day number 1, but that didn't happen. So depending on how fast Sampler of Stitches goes, although I'm dreading that Van Dyke chain stitch thing. Anyway, if I somehow get that knocked off in reasonable time, then the rest of tonight's stitching is going to be clearly working on this. So that is the cottage. I also have another new start for October. The reason why it's a new start for October is because last year's October piece, which was Halloween Sampler by Cottage Garden Samplings, was completely finished in October. So if I worked on a project and I got it completely finished last year and it was not a carry forward whip, to me it justified that I got to have another new start. So I started that yesterday as well because it was a Saturday. It's gonna go away until I get my cottage complete. But this is from Art to Heart, Bittersweet Pumpkins. I'm just going to tell you right now, this is a big stitch. This is a big stitch. I know you look at that and go like, it's not going to be that bad, but it's a lot more stitches than you think. It is, so I'm just warding off a sneeze, 140 wide by 122 high. The called for colors are a combination of Gentle Arts and Weeks Dye Works threads. The called for fabric was Weeks Dye Works 30 count parchment linen. Wait till you see what I'm doing it on. Ready? Dun, dun, dun. It's a brown fabric. I am stitching this on 32 count Platinum Lugana. Now, the color isn't showing up quite correctly, so I've started here because I did this as a center start. So I'm working on this block here. It is gassed Weathered Barn. So we all know what Weathered Barn looks like. So it's showing up darker here on the camera than it is in real life. But brace yourself, I'm doing it on a brown fabric, or what's brown for me. I know, you didn't know that that day was going to come, but it's come. And I specifically ended up here. One, it's a fall piece. As you can tell, it's not brown, 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 brown. It's not like Vincomo or Vintage Country Mocha, which it would look nice on as well if you're good with brown. But here's this is going to be hard. Flossway bags. Here's sort of the color palette for that. Where's my blue? There's a blue in here, just, there it is. Anyway, there is a blue in there. So that's why it's being done. White was just going to be wrong. This huge white-ish pumpkin, that is being stitched with Gentle Arts Peach Ice Cream, which is this. So it did need to be dark enough that this is going to show up on. Right, so gray was not correct for this color palette. So I went with platinum, and somebody else said in the videos I've watched this week, it was like, I don't understand why it's called platinum. I am with you on that. I don't understand why this fabric is called platinum either, because in my head, platinum is a silver color, because I always think of platinum in terms of jewelry. Anyway, I don't know why it's called platinum. The other thing about this is I am continuing my fabric samples. So when I was cutting out the fabric, so I had a fat quarter for this. So I cut out the correct size for this. I had a little bit left over that I could put on. So I am continuing my my own personal collection of fabric cards. So this is what I call, this is a much healthier sample size, using, you know, standard recipe cards. So again, it's got 32 count platinum Lugana. It's a Zweigart fabric, and on the back, I'm making note of what I've used it in. Anyway, so I did my fabric card as part of my prep for that. So the other thing that I'm doing on this is I am stitching, I'm actually doing my stitches vertically. So I'm stitching each X individually, so fully completing it before I move on to the next one, but I'm specifically doing it actually vertically, so up and down, because that's how I want my gradations and the variegation in the hand-dyed fibers to look. It is how they stitched the sample, so you can see it there a little bit better. The other option is if I were doing it horizontally and going back and forth this way, it just means that my variegation would come out horizontal and would look like, well, you know what I mean. Anyway, so I would rather that the variegation run up and down sort of in stripes as opposed to horizontally. So personal choice, you can do it however you want. Even as I was starting this block, I was thinking again of the conversation I had with Jeanette Douglas, where on a lot of her pieces, she actually stitches them in diagonal, because it just gives sort of like, you know, more like flag movement, so it looks more wavy. But I very specifically was aiming so that you would see these vertical stripes in these blocks as I'm doing them. That was my goal. So that's why I'm stitching it. On one of the other floss tubes I watched this week, someone's going like, you know, does it use up your thread faster if you're doing it that way? Yes, it does. I'm okay with that because I'm aiming for this effect, and I'm prepared to do what it takes to get that effect. That's not for everybody. There are lots of people who, regardless of things, do the loop method and are totally happy with their results. How you use your variegated, how you stitch with your variegated is up to you. It's your piece. Use it in the way that achieves the look that you're aiming for on the piece that will make you happy. Full stop. End of story. As you know, it's your piece. You do what makes you happy. Okay. So there's that. So that is all of the stitching that I have done this week. Sorry, just got to juggle a couple of things here. A lot of juggling. Okay, now we're going to get to the part of the program for Denise. As she mentioned, and as I've talked about, I have this 10-year planner that I've got. Yeah, I know. I'm still bizarrely excited about it. So we are now at the portion of the program. It is a new portion of the program, which I'm calling officially Nerding with Numbers. It's only going to occur once a month when we get to the end of the month and I have all of my numbers collected, because I've now turned into a numbers person, because my app tells me. Man, that sneeze is really working at it. So I have come up with my official end of September stitching calendar. So Denise, get ready. Look up, look up. Yes, maybe I should do it this way so that the calendar is in the... Okay, we're just going to move this. So there's my calendar, all complete. I'm very excited about this. It feels weird doing it that way. Sorry, it's going to have to go this way. So I have used a different color for every project that I worked on in the month. I have noted where it is and how many stitches I put into it. So different, it's multicolored. It looks nicer in real life. I started off on my my laminated version of this calendar. And again, I'm glad that I'm practicing this before we get to, because I used all acronyms, and by the end of the month, even I was struggling with what some of the acronyms meant, so noted. I'm still using acronyms for the designer name, but I'm actually writing out the name of, you know, so September Cottage, so that 5 years from now, when I go back and reflect on things, I will be able to understand what I'm doing. So I kept track of, you know, how many projects down here, and then I've added my version of a summary of things that I'm tracking. And then while I was finishing it up yesterday, I was decided that I should also add like events that occurred in the month that to me were notable, whether good things or bad things. Unfortunately, this month it's a lot of bad. Anyway, so I've got, you know, the war in Ukraine, that we're still having the war in Ukraine. Queen Elizabeth II passed away. We had her funeral this month. Hurricane Fiona hit Eastern Canada. There are still people in Eastern Canada, I know it's more than a week later, who still don't have power. And of course, the horrible events of Hurricane Ian, which is still making its way through the U.S. right now. Anyway, so not a positive news month this month for sure. I did also put, I'm trying to read it backwards, right? So I actually did mark on the day when Queen Elizabeth, it was funny because I was going like, the 8th, why do I think the 9th? And the answer is because my maternal grandmother passed away on September 9th, 1999 at the age of 90. Anyway, so that's why September 9th is really the date that I have in my head, but Queen Elizabeth was the 8th. Anyway, so I marked the day that she died, and again, I'm having a terrible time. The funeral. Anyway, so that's what my calendar's looking like. I am using, you know, and again, this is a good practice for when I go to use my actual 10-year planner. It will be interesting to see how well this holds up after 10 years. I am planning on doing this for the remaining 4 months of this year. And then I know, weird. I'm actually going to tape an envelope into this front section, and I'm just going to stick them in there. So it's going to turn it into a 10 and a third. I know, weird, but you know, you've met me. So it makes me feel good about, you know, part of this was like, you know, am I happy with my block sizes? And the answer is yes. I think I'm going to, so, you know, I think September was a fairly representative month for me. So it means that this, that the note section over here is going to be sufficient to keep track of all of the projects that I work on. And then, while it doesn't have sort of that bottom section, I'm going to use, because every month is going to have some blank squares where there's no dates. Now, this one is a weird month because they've had to slash these couple. So I may actually turn these into that this is actually the 23rd and all the 24th, just to give me full blocks, and then bump these other two up here. But it will still give me these other ones to do sort of summaries or world events. So I still think it's going to be, I've got enough space in here that I can do my thing. I'm also specifically using fine tip pens, just, you know, because, you know, in case I get really wordy in here. You know, so as I was doing this, I was really glad that I was using fine tip. If I had chosen a medium tip, I think I would have struggled more with getting it to fit in the squares. So fine tip pens is the answer for me. And in case you're wondering, this is this is from Amazon. Don't we usually get these things from Amazon? So 22 different colors. I will say some of the paler ones, you know, the one that I used, this pale blue one for Polar Mandala, I really had to go over it twice to get it to show up. But 22 different colors from Amazon. I will put a link to that in the notes section below if you are interested in these at all. But that's what I'm using for mine. Now, the nerding with numbers. So here's the section of what did I really get accomplished. So in the month of September, I worked on a total of 10 different projects, which to me was hilarious. For someone who pre-starting Flosstube was a solely monogamous stitcher, the fact that I worked on 10 projects this month, I think is hilarious. Again, your stitching life can be a journey. I used to be only one ever until it was complete. Like the project was fully complete. It wasn't even like one project a month. It was like I worked on one project till it was done. I've worked on a total of 10 projects. I put in a total of 7,591 stitches, which does not include any of the stitching on the drawn thread sampler of stitches, because that's not in Markup RXP. If it's not in Markup RXP and it doesn't count the stitch for me, I'm not counting the stitches. So 7,591 plus drawn thread sampler of stitches stitching. I had a total of 2 new starts in the month. I started my September cottage, and I started I'm calling the project Her Majesty by Vivsters, my memorial piece for Queen Elizabeth. I had a total of 2 chart finishes. There's a difference between project finishes and chart finishes. I had 2 chart finishes, which was the cottage of the month, and I did finish the chart from the drawn thread sampler of stitches STU, so that chart was completed. I only had 1 project finish, which was the October cottage. So technically my whip count is up by 1 because I started the Vivsters piece. Anyway, so yeah, it's as we talk about, I'm bizarrely happy about my calendar for the month. And I've started October. Now, this is interesting because that green there, that's my my musical Christmas. It didn't fit in my block, which it's going to be fine. I just used the blank space behind it and put an arrow in. I really stitched this on Saturday. But yes, I know. That's why I'm calling the section Nerding with Numbers. So that is my September stitching in review. I feel like I did a good job in September. I will say it's interesting when you look at the numbers, because I can say so I was successful that I stitched every day. Every day I got some stitches in. Not all of them were good stitching days. So my least amount of stitching was this Saturday over here, the 10th. I don't know what I was doing that I got so little stitching done. I got a total of 53 stitches in. Still, it was 53 more than I had when I started that day. And the most that I got in, it was a big day. It was a Wednesday. No explanation. Here, 515 stitches into my cottage. It's probably when I got the house finished. I don't know. Anyway. I'm not writing down what exactly I worked on, because it's just, you know, that's a step too far for me at this point in time. Check back later, see if I change my mind. But yeah, I was pleased with how my calendar's coming along. Anyway, so that is my nerding with numbers. Like I say, it's a new section we're going to talk about once a month. Okay, the next thing I'm going to talk about is just getting ready so I am planning on starting that Chatelaine Designs, joining the Chatelaine Designs sale starting on October the 7th, which is the Tiny Marie Antoinette Gate. We talked about this 2 weeks ago when I was talking about chatelaine. So I've been working on, one of my things this week was to start pulling the threads for this because I'm following my own advice that says I'm not buying anything new. I do not have all of the called for items for this particular chart, but I am not buying new threads for a chart that is, I've forgotten the number, but it's like, I don't know, 38 by 45, let's call it that. I don't know that that's accurate, but it's close enough. Anyway, so I've started pulling my threads. I haven't made decisions on all of them, but I certainly got to start, you know, and when in doubt. When she's got the DMC equivalent, I've pulled straight up DMC, right? So congratulations. There's my starting of the DMCs. I did want to highlight, originally, I didn't think I had the PB25 that's called for, so I was just going to use PB01. Then I moved something and discovered apparently my numerical skills are somewhat suspect, and I actually did have some PB25. I still haven't decided which one I'm going to use when I actually get there. So in case you're wondering, that's what PB25 looks like. That's the called for. This is what I was going to use. It's clearly a much brighter one. This is, in real life, I'd say this is more towards like the copper end of gold. And I'm keeping these in a floss away bag together because I haven't decided which one of these I'm actually going to use. I think as I get the rest of this stitched up, I will end up deciding whether I like sort of like this combination or if I like this combination. Now it's also going to depend on fabric choice. I haven't picked out a fabric for this. I have until Friday to get it, you know, pulled together. So we will do that. I've also realized I forgot to write down, I've got the library book for the net stitch and get together. It's going to be in the note section below. I think it's the 25th of October between 9:30 and 12:30, but check the note section below. I will have that confirmed. I think it's the 25th. Anyway, check the note section. The other one that I also had highlighted, so this is funny because technically in my stash of threads, I didn't have this. This is actually part of the threads for Polar Mandala. So I'm probably gonna rob from Polar, but maybe not. This is the called for sea glass, Karen Water Lilies. She did not have a DMC equivalent for this, so I just thought I would show it. You know, it's a pale green, and again, for the number of stitches that this gets used for, and it's hard to tell in the picture, it is all of this sort of behind this gold section. That's what's called for. So in the picture it does not look gray or green at all, but that's what's called for there. So again, do I really feel like you need to use this? So the other thing I also looked at was on the chatelaine, it tells you how much you're going to need. So I think it says I'm going to need 4 yards of a 6-yard skein of this. So really 2/3 of it, which means I should have some left over. I'm still debating whether I'm actually going to break into this. I have a Karen Water Lilies Celadon, which has already started. I used it for my Catherine Agnes that I finished by Indigo Rose. So I'm actually going to run out, one of my tasks for today is I'm going to run this upstairs and haul that one out and compare them. So I might rob from Peter to do Paul, but I also may go, I'm going to save this entirely for Polar Mandala and use the Water Lily Celadon that I've already got started. Because again, it's also a light variegated green, so I'll check on that. I will have, well, by next video, I will at least have an idea of what I've really done on this one. I'm also debating changing, the called for this dark part of the gates is 310. I'm debating changing that to a dark gray, like $37.99. I just need to decide how I feel about that in combination with the metallic gold. So stay tuned. Okay, so that's where I am at kitting up my Chatelaine Designs. Whew, this stuff can all get shoved back. Okay, Stashquisitions. Not a lot. I was sort of well behaved. On the Sunshine Stitchers a couple of weeks ago, they were talking, Deb, their guest, was talking about something that she had bought to contain the spools. If you're hand-dyed fibers by Vicki Clayton, her silks come in spools. I have got some Vicki Clayton silks. I've got my collection of Vicki Clayton silks are from when she was hand dyeing the first time. I haven't bought any. So she was dyeing and then she said, I'm not going to be dyeing silks anymore. And I did a hurried flurry of some shopping for some specific things before she stopped making them. And then she went away for a while and now she's back. So all of my collection is from the first version. And in my 5-year plan, I do have at least one project that is going to be using the Vicki Clayton silks that I already have in my stash. So the fact that she was like, and this is what I'm using to contain them while I'm working on them, because they do come in spools. When they showed this on the Sunshine Stitchers, I immediately went to Amazon because that's where she got hers from, and I found them in Canada. They're a little more expensive in Canada than they are in the US, but still cheaper to get it from Amazon.ca than pay the shipping from the US to Canada for these. Anyway, so this is what they look like, and I just thought I would bring my, so here's my Vicki Clayton silk spool, and yes, they fit in there just lovely. So read the description carefully, because that's what I did when I was looking for them, because it's to handle a very specific spool size type. Anyway, I went searching for that, found the right ones, and again, you can very, very securely close these because you've got this snap and you've got a side snap as well. So trust me, they're in there. They're not going anywhere. So I thought that was great. You just have to remember that when you're opening it, you have to open twice, not once. So that's what they look in there. I'm going to take them back out, put them to where they're being contained until I start working on these projects. I will say, if you are an owner of Vicki Clayton silks from the first time, she also did some silks that came on larger spools. There was a whole reason why they came on the larger spools. I'm actually just, hang on. Yeah, it's so you could get more, not surprisingly. So this is 8.7 yards of a 6-stranded silk. So effectively this is like a skein of DMC on a spool. And then the larger ones were 25 yards of 6-stranded. So these are the two different sizes. This fits in the container I've just showed. This clearly will not fit, which is okay. I have way more of this size than I do of this size. These are the ones that I bought for specific projects, so that's good. The ones that I got came as a set of 2, which I think is great. so you can get 25 in each of these. I think that's going to work out well for me. I don't think the projects that I've got the Vicki Clayton silks tagged for require more than 25 colors. So to me, this says I can have 2 projects going at this, you know, that I'm working on that are in my whip pile that potentially are using the Vicki Clayton silks. So I've added those into my stash because one of them I'm going to need for my 5-year plan. Sorry, I just... in case you're wondering, what am I keeping them in the meantime? So this is actually, this is a set of silks for a series of 4 charts. I'm keeping them, this is intended to keep photographs. So this is, anyway, I've got it. I just went, the spools fit in here. You know, you can fit 2 layers of them in here, so I can fit all of the spools for those 4 projects into one container, so that I can go, that's the project. Which I say that now like it's easy, because when I was originally looking for them before, I was looking for them originally when I got these to go, let's make sure that they fit, and I couldn't locate it, but we're all good now. So those are all of the stash acquisitions that I have for this week, was just that one. I will put a link to the Amazon description, because there was a whole big thing on Sunshine Stitchers about what the brand name is of this, and I'm not going to get into that. I'm just going to put a link to what it is so that you can copy the description, and it will have that whole thing about it. You know, it specifically says this will fit bobbins for sewing machine type X with bobbins of Y. I'm not a sewing machine person, so I don't know any of that stuff. So I found the thing. It will have the information there so that you can search on Amazon to your heart's content if you've got hand-dyed fibers by Vicki that you're looking for containers for. All right, and with that, we are now into the topic. We're still over an hour. Okay. So the topic for this week, as mentioned last week, is how far am I willing to carry my threads? How do I do it? How do I decide? Blah, blah, blah. No back shaming. No reverse back shaming. And it started off with the question, you know, particularly because it was someone who was working on full coverage pieces. And I will say, how I travel with my thread on a full coverage piece is different than how I travel with thread on other pieces. I was originally, when I was playing, so I was going to say, let's talk how I travel. And then I went, I'm going to get way too many people who are not interested in stitching that are going to be mad about it. So it's going to be, it's called, let's talk how I carry my threads. Anyway, so here is the back of my, this is my Polar Mandala, you know, because this center square is all full coverage. It's ginormous, but so that's what it looks like. You're not going to see a lot, you know, certainly on the rest of it, you're not going to see a lot of carried threads. And there's a reason for that that is specific to how I do full coverage. So I don't do parking. Parking works for a lot of people, and I think that's great. It's like everything else, you got to find the thing that works for you. Parking does not work for me. I hate the dangling threads. It drives me, like, watch me lose my stuff in 5 minutes. Make me have a bunch of dangling threads. I tend to stitch, when I'm doing full coverage, I tend to do my version of color completion. So it really is, I will take a color, I will have a length of thread, and I will stitch until all of that color, until that thread is gone, or until I get to a spot where I go, like, there's no more of it left within a reasonable distance. For me, how I decide what a reasonable distance is it more stitches than I would, so if I'm using one strand, I run my, certainly on this, I can start by running my thread underneath a number of stitches, to get to where I'm starting. And then I finish off by running it under threads as well. So for me, the point where I decide to end a thread and potentially restart it in a different location is I go, is the distance between where I'm ending and where I'm starting longer than what I would use in thread for starting and finishing another thread? It's that simple. Because it's full coverage, you can actually carry it longer than I would be comfortable on any other piece, solely because it's full coverage. Because it's full coverage, it means you're going to be stitching every stitch. It's going to end up being, this is a bad one because it's really big, right? It's going to end up being, this block is going to be ended up being solid. So how I carry my threads at the end of the day, nobody's going to be able to see it. The only reason why I wouldn't carry it what I call extravagantly is because I just don't want to add too many layers of bulk by starting and stop, by having all of these dragged threads all over. So, let's go from here. Let's pretend this color, there's one over here. That's not necessarily an egregious length, but for my counting, I go, this is more than it would be for me to, start and end somewhere else. So instead of, adding additional bulk to this, where I've got who knows how many colors coming in here, I'm going to save myself that and just sort of start again lower when it comes up again. So for me, for full coverage, that's how I make the decision. Everybody makes a decision that works for them. Certainly on the Polar one, because it's 1/1 on 32 count, it's already tiny and, is going to end up being like a very solid stitch. That's why I'm mindful of that. If I were working, 1/1 on 25 count, I might be carrying it a little bit further. Again, it just depends on, if I got there and I'm like going, well, it's technically like 3 more than I would normally do, I'm probably going to do it. If I go like, it's 17 more than what I would normally consider going, that's probably where I'm going to go. That's too far for me. But, full coverage, you can carry further than you might otherwise carry. Because it's going to end up being fully covered and nobody's going to be able to see where you've traveled with your thread. Again, my only thing is I just don't want to add too many layers of bulk. It'll depend on whether you've got chunks of color. If it's really confetti heavy, that I might change my mind then and go like, I'm willing to carry less because there's just way too many. I don't know. It depends on your piece. If it's bulking up, that's where I would revisit how far I'm carrying on full coverage. And like I say, full coverage is its own beast. Okay, here's the back of this is the back of my bee's knees. Just to prove it, here's the front up close. This is the back. And I haven't carried my threads anywhere. Now, part of the reason for that has 100% to do with the fact that I am using one variegated thread. And when I'm using it, because it's one thread, somebody might go, but you should be able to carry. And the answer is I don't. I try to pick a path and follow that path because I'm trying to follow the gradations. And, so I will say, I sort of started here, came around here, came down and did this bit and ended, because there was no way I was going to carry that thread to work on whatever was here. It's just, you have a little bit left, so then you start working on filling in the center. So on this one, I don't really carry my threads, even between like here and there. I would have sort of stitched all of this. I would have not carried it over to here. Why? Because I'm trying to find paths for my thread because it's one variegated color and I'm trying to find a path where I can go, here is a path where I'm using up the color. You know, are there people out there going like, well, that's a lot of work and you could have easily started, you know, if I had done all of this, you could have easily carried it. That's their choice. Everybody makes the choice that works best for them. And this is a choice that I'm making for myself on this, because it works for how my brain is approaching how I'm using my variegated thread. So I'm generally not carrying it all in between elements because I'm trying to find a path to do the design of the element. I'm actually looking at going like, I don't like, I'm looking at going like, okay, this is going to be like there, like that's probably about as far as I've carried, which is about all of what, two stitches maybe. But again, it was behind something, and it wasn't very far at all. Yeah, because I'm looking and going like, I don't really think I've got any good examples of a lot of carrying on this at all. And again, that has to do with the fact that it's variegated and how I choose to use my variegated threads. Okay. Sometimes you have no choice. You know, there are lots of people who talk about using pin stitches for X, Y, and Z and starting and stopping and all that kind of things. Sometimes you have no choice. So here's sampler stitches. You know, when I was working on these stars, you know, so these are a specific, we all know I don't have the names of the stitches. You know, this is a specific specialty stitch, but it would have been incredibly hard to start and stop for each one of these things, and I didn't. So I carried, and you can see on the back that I carried. Now, one of the, you know, if it makes anybody feel better, there I carried. The trick to me is as I'm carrying, so I remember that I stitched this in a very specific order. I'm just looking for one of my boards, which I've now, there it is. One of the things that helps me decide how far I'm willing to carry is I'm putting, you know, so this at the end of the day is going to get framed. Period. This is going to go to a professional framer and it's going to get framed. So for me, the thing is when I push something up against this, I have tried to make sure that the path that I chose to do this, that when because it's going to be stretched across mount board, that you can't see those carried threads. So this can get interesting depending on what fabric you're stitching on. So the one that makes where you can carry a little further, the one that you can probably carry the most without seeing it is Ada. Now, Ada is clearly not the appropriate fabric for this because you can't do the specialty stitches. Then I would say it's an even weave, whether it's Jobelin or Lugana. Again, because you've got more uniform threads, it gives you a little bit more coverage than some linens. If I were doing this on a linen, depending on the linen, because we all know there are some where you go like there are gauzier linens than others, right? So it all depends on which linen you have, what count of linen you've got, whatever, as to whether or not, you know, if I stitched these same stars in the same path with carrying it the same way, whether or not you would be able to see that on a linen, I don't know. But I did check as I was carrying these threads, you know, after I did see, you know, several of them saying like, okay, can I see that? Can I see that? You know, when I push up against it, can I see the carried thread? So, you know, one of the, actually, like even now I'm still going like, yeah, it's not bad. you know, so one of the things about the path that I carried, like these, I don't know what you're saying, there we go, like these ones, because I think it's like, what I did is I carried over for 3 stitches, but only down 1. And because you've got that, like I wouldn't carry like straight vertically or horizontally X number of stitches, because when you do that, your thread is clearly falling where all of the openings are between the thread, the warp and the weft of your fabric, right? So anytime you're carrying your thread 100% vertically or 100% horizontally, that thread can be seen. And if you're carrying it for a number of stitches, it can be seen. So, you know, I have no problems, you know, making cross stitches all in a row, because they're going to be all in a row, and those clearly got stitched all vertically, right, straight up and down, and I carried the threads, and that's all fine because it's one solid line. When I'm carrying over multiple stitches, I do try to get it on like a, you know, again, a perfect like 45-degree angle. I don't like. I like it to be more angular than that, just because I think it gives you that, it's sort of gives you a little more coverage from the other threads. You know, the same thing happened down here for this. You know, when I'm holding it up against the light, I'm looking, it's like, man, I can see all the carried threads, and I'm like, I really did check these, right? I really did check. It looks okay. It's like, that's why when you're doing this, it's like, so I'm like they're okay, right? I did okay. Anyway, it's weird when I can see the sunlight coming through. But again, all of these, you know, this is a series of half stitches here to do the raindrops. Sorry, a pin stitch isn't going to save you, right? It's a series of half stitches. There's no coverage. There's no way for you to get around it. You're going to have to carry your thread, you know, and man, and so I did. Now, again, as I was stitching these, I was working out a path, trying to get them so that they were coming on sort of a sharper diagonal as I was doing the half stitches, just to give me that, so that I would have a little bit more fabric coverage. Like here, you can see it's coming at, believe it or not, it is coming at a bit of an angle up here. Because I could have just done, man, this is hard to do, like done the half stitch. Oh, this is what I did. I could have done a half stitch down here, come straight down, did a half stitch up and straight down and do this bottom one. And I didn't do that. Why? Because it means that the thread would be running 100% vertical, right? It would be following the threads. So what did I do? I did the half stitch here and then came across and started at the top again and came down and, you know, again came diagonally. Why? Because it's an odd number of threads, it just gives you that, gives you a little more fabric coverage when you're carrying it. You know, but for me the big check is, you know, however you're finishing it, you know, it's my it's my hand check, or, you know, haul up one of my pieces of board here saying, because, you know, it's gonna, how it's gonna get mounted or whatever, something's gonna be up against it. Can I see now? Can I see it if I'm looking at it like this? Is not relevant. That's the wrong distance. It's when you're holding it back with something against it. Let's go back. So here's the big close-up. I've got something up against it. Can you see the carried threads? When you come down here, can you see the carried threads? So that's how I'm checking. You know, the same way when I made the comment about that I did all of the yellows all in a row here. Yes, I carried my threads. Because at the end of the day, the way that it worked out, you know, starting and stopping all of that individually 7 times was not going to work out well. But I'm still happy with, can you see the carried threads? I don't think you can. Or I can't. or if you can, I'm still happy with what I did. So again, it's a personal choice. I'm actually looking here and going, I wish I had brought the work of Christmas. But we'll pick on Anne Morrison. So one of the things that you often hear people talk about when you carry threads or when you don't carry threads, and again, personal choice. As long as you're happy with how it looks, that's all that matters. But on Anne Morrison, you know, you have all these individual letters. And I will say that there are people who will come along and they will stitch this letter, finish it off, and start again, and so that they don't carry in between their letters. I will tell you that I have carried my thread in between these letters. I haven't carried my thread in between these letters because they change color every time. But I've carried my threads in between these letters, and I was comfortable doing that predominantly because there's usually, when I pick my path, I've found a path where at the end of the day, you know, so if I stitch the U and I start here at the top and I come down and around and back up, there's only one stitch between the U and the V, and I was totally fine carrying my thread between the U and the V for one stitch and keep going. Now, if it's 2 stitches, it depends on the angle, whether or not I can see it, whether I would start and stop. If it's 3 stitches, I would probably stop. So, you know, this is why I'm going, I regret not bringing the work of Christmas, because what I found when I was stitching all the words in the work of Christmas, I was fine stitching the word and carrying my thread between the individual letters of, you know, a word, but I wasn't willing to carry my thread between different words because the space was just too far and I could see my thread. So really, that's, for me, on anything else, that's my determination as to whether or not I carry my thread. Can I see my thread? I'll probably end it and restart. If, you know, on sampler of stitches where, like, there's no option, you have to carry your thread. You can't start and stop. I just try to find a path where I'm hopefully minimizing how much thread is showing. Sometimes you can do that easily, sometimes you can't. And if the designer's created something where that's just how it works out, sometimes you have to go, this is maybe not optimal for me, but there's no better way. There are certain things where you just can't choose, you know, there are a lot of people go like, if the pin stitch will save, you know, you don't have to carry X, Y, and Z and whatever. You know, I'm thinking back to White Christmas, like all those individual spots in the way that they showed it on the model stitch. Again, one of the differences was that they were stitching white on white, so you could carry your thread between all these big spaces, you know, and you know, you might be able to see it a little bit depending on, you know, whether you did antique white or white, but it wasn't necessarily going to be where you look at it and go, wow, I can totally see where you carried your threads. When I switched my fabric to make it on the dark teal Quaker cloth that I used, if I had used white on there and carried, like it, I did a sample stitch, I tested it, and I just went, whoa, you can totally see all of this carried thread, which was not gonna, I was gonna be very unhappy at the end. I was not gonna be okay with it. Which is why I decided it's like everything has to be done with beads. The other interesting thing about that one is if I had chosen, if you're having it framed and it's being mounted on board, usually that board is white. So it can help in certain circumstances to sort of see what that looks like, which is why I have this, not that this is mounting board, but I specifically have this piece that is white, because then I can hold it up behind something and go, if I put it on white mounting board and it was being stretched, some of that white might, it might be hidden because you're mounting it against white for the stretching. In the case of White Christmas, it didn't help at all. I was very unhappy with it, hence the change. But that's another way to look at it. You know, so white might blend in with your mounting board. If I was carrying navy blue thread, let's go back to simpler stitches. If I was carrying navy blue thread and I'm using white mounting board and this is a gray fabric, it's not going to help, right? So you can see the outline of this going, so that's what it's going to look like when it's against mounting board. And again, this is why I have it handy, because I hold it up against things. So when I do things like, I'm going to pick on the R. So even though there are these side bits of navy, I did not carry, believe it or not, I did not carry between the R and these little bits. But again, it's your piece. You know what you're going to do with this piece when you're done with it. So the only person who has to be happy with how you're carrying your threads is you. Which reminds me, I had a tip. So for any of you that are doing sampler stitches, this is a back again. These are the vault stitches. So I am following the stitch diagram, but I'm reversing it because you do them in rows. So I did the first one, and your ending point, let's use the tweezers. Your ending point for the vault stitch is, like on this first one, your ending stitch is up here at the top. So then I would bring my thread down diagonally down here to the diagonally opposite corner, and that would be number 1, and I would stitch it in the upside down version. And then from, you know, when you finish that one, same thing, drag it diagonally back to the starting point, and then you're back at the right side version of the stitch diagram. And that's how I was able to, for the most part, not have to carry my thread. The way that my thread came, I was short one, so I did have to carry my threads, and you can see here, up to these bits, just to carry them over. Really, it was like bring it up so I could get to a spot, carry it under stitched so I could get to my next one. But again, I'll show you the test. I was okay with that. For most of them, I didn't have to carry it anywhere. Because if you follow the stitch diagram all the way down, you would end up here at this top one, and you would have to bring it down all the way to the very bottom of the next stitch, which is down here, which is like 6 stitches completely vertical. And that thread I could see, and I was unhappy. But again, so here's my test, putting it against the back, and as far as I'm concerned, I don't think you can see that I've carried my thread from the bottom up here to the top. Anyway, in summary, because we're running out of time, because I promised it wasn't going to be 2 hours, carrying threads, for me, the critical part is how do you make sure that you don't see it? Carrying threads a long ways away behind things, if you can see this big carried thread, for me, that is a detracting factor. If it doesn't bother you, hey, it's still your piece, you can do whatever you want. But that's how I make the decisions on how far I carry my threads on non-full coverage pieces. On full coverage pieces, it's really my determining factor is, you know, am I carrying it more than the number of stitches that it would take for me to start and stop a new thread. Just because I'm trying to, you know, the thing about full coverage pieces, because it's full coverage, depending on how many colors you're using, it can be bulky, particularly if it's confetti heavy. So that's where I'm trying to minimize the amount of bulk that I'm adding to the back of the piece for starting and stopping on full coverage pieces. Because if you're doing a full coverage piece at some point, hopefully you're going to finish it and it's going to get framed fantastically. So it's only that, you know, save the framer trying to sort of, you know, what to do if you've got a really bulky piece. But that's also why I tend to do color completion. You know, pick a color, take a length of thread, follow it all the way down. Why? Because it's minimizing my starting and stopping. Starting and stopping and how far I'm carrying, and you know, everybody's got their thing about how they approach full coverage pieces. Do what works for you. Full stop. Do what works for you. Don't start adopting things like you will never convince me to do parking. I have tried parking. It drives me nuts. It may end up more efficient stitching when you're doing 10 by 10 blocks, whether it's straight, vertical, horizontal, diagonal, whatever you're doing. But the process drives me insane, which is a bad place to be with a hobby. So I don't do it. And other people do it and they love it, and that's great. I do color completion, and that's what works for me. Some people do extreme color completion, which means they're carrying their threads all over, you know, to kingdom come. If it works for them, that's great. It's your piece. Do what works for you. Those are just my thoughts on it. So I hope that's helpful. As always, if you've got questions, comments, thoughts, if any of you have found sort of better rules of thumb about how you're deciding on how to carry your threads, throw them into the comments down below. Hey, we can always learn something. There's always somebody's got some tip that may work for who knows. So thoughts, comments, questions, always welcome in the comment section down below. And we're going to wrap it up because we're now officially over an hour and a half. As always, thinking of the people of the Ukraine. I'm thinking of the people of Eastern Canada, the ones who are trying to recover from the effects of Fiona. I'm absolutely thinking about the devastation and the destruction of Ian, because that's, yeah, it's a bad hurricane. I have to admit, I didn't check the weather this morning to see, like, it was hitting South Carolina, and South Carolina wasn't doing well. I don't know where the path is taking it next. I'm also really concerned because we are in the early part of the hurricane season. We've got another couple of months and we're already at Ian. They name them alphabetically, so makes me worried about the season. So as always, safety first, safety first, safety first. I know sometimes our possessions are treasured by us, and I can think of things in my home where it's like, if you have to grab 5 things, what are you grabbing? And I know exactly what they are. You know, one of them is the needlepoint picture that my grandmother made for me, but in the case of dire circumstances, you know, I'm thinking fire for me because I'm hopefully not close to a flood, but, you know, if the house were on fire, and the answer is I need to get out safely. Yeah, heartbreaking if I lost it, but Grandma would not want me dying to save her needlework picture. So, and, you know, I had friends that when we had the floods here a number of years ago, it's coming up on 10 years, you know, some friends that I don't see very regularly, we were getting together at Christmas, and she just looked at me, she said, I lost all my Christmas decorations. She and I both love decorating for Christmas, and she's like, I lost all of my Christmas decorations. And, you know, you just go like, you know, if you've collected them over years, and all the things you know, from your trips and your travels and decorations that your kids made that you're still using, heartbreaking. It's absolutely heartbreaking. But it was more important that everybody got out alive. So safety first, safety first, safety first. So I hope you're staying safe. I hope you're staying healthy. I hope you're finding some time to do some stitching, and then I hope your stitching is bringing you some joy, stress relief, mental health break, whatever you need it to be. I hope it's working for you. Find some time to get some stitches in, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Take care.